Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I am pleased to be joined by uh, Shami Stovall, author of Time Marked Warlock. Shami, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. Coming at you live from the 1920s.
I've seen a lot of your interviews have that aesthetic. It's very on brand. So,
Yep.
the first question I have for you before we get into the book that we're talking about is how did you get involved in writing and publishing?
Um, a long time ago, because I'm so old, I was a dungeon master for D&D games. And a lot of people told me that they really enjoyed me as a dungeon master because I made my stories completely like whole cloth. I made all the characters, I made all these like interesting scenarios, and everybody constantly told me like, "Whoa, you should write a book." So I did. I wrote a book, showed it to my husband, and he warned me that if he didn't like it, he was going to tell me. And he's always brutally honest about everything. So I knew if he read this and he was like, "This is crap," I should probably give this up. But he read it and he was like, "Whoa, Shammy, someday you're just going to be like one of the greatest authors of all time. You should definitely pursue this." So even though I was in law school preparing to be an attorney, I spent a lot of time learning how to write books. I went to a lot of writing conventions. I read tons of articles about the craft of writing and how a story should be structured, good dialogue, good character motivations, all those fun things that you got to do to be an expert in your field. And I enjoy writing just so much. I do it all the time, like 6 to 8 hours every day, just because I really, really like it. So that's where we are. I am no longer an attorney. I do writing full time. This is all I do.
So you went the Terry Brooks way of starting out in law and then moving
Yeah,
into the
dude,
writing.
you would be surprised how many attorneys turn author. So many. I mean, being an attorney sucks. That's the actual reality. Nobody wants to be an attorney. Um, or really, the thing is, nobody goes to an attorney if they're having a good day. You know what
Hmm.
I'm saying?
Yep.
So
Hmm.
everything you deal with is always a problem and awful. Attorneys definitely want to get out of that field as fast as possible.
Although, compared to some authors, you probably have a better handle on the business and potentially all the legal contracts with like stuff. So you're not the author worried about the fine print because you know how that works.
Oh yeah. There have been a couple contracts where things written in the contract are just awful, and then when I point it out, and they're like, "Oh, geez, we didn't mean that. We'll change it around." It's like, yeah, that's great. That's thank you. You know what I'm saying? Like, um, but you know, uh, I guess it really helped me with setting up a company. So me and my husband
Hmm.
run Capital Station Books, and that's how we do all of our publishing through that. And
Hmm.
it was, I wasn't intimidated to start a company or anything like that. I know how to do that. I know, at least mild amount of business law, so it was fine. We're fine. Everything's fine.
So today we wanted to talk about one of your new releases, which is the book Time Marked Warlock. It is going to be the first in a series. The second book comes out as we're releasing this today. And so the first question I have for you is, what is the basic pitch, like the elevator pitch for people who don't know what the book is?
I usually describe it as Groundhog's Day meets the Dresden Files.
Hmm.
Because there's a major time loop aspect. The main character, and this isn't really spoilers because you come to know this very, very early in book one, but he has made a pact with Kronos, the Titan of Time, and so he has the ability to rewind time up to 24 hours. And he uses this ability basically to catch criminals, to
Hmm.
stop murderers and bad people because he can keep rewinding time. He can keep gathering evidence from all sorts of things. He can talk to people, rewind time, talk to them again, like that kind of thing. Um, and so I find that really fun. Like, it lends itself to a lot of comedy or a lot of, I guess some people have described it as cozy or like, that the main character is going to win because the bad guy can't even get away, if that makes any sense. So it's a lot of fun. It's a fun series, I think.
Well, that is, I think, the most simple and correct pitch I've had for any author that I've interviewed, because every author has something that it's based on, but they have like they have to like wiggle around and try to hit as many things. If I had to give the exact give a pitch, I would have given word for word Groundhog Day meets Dresden Files, because that is that is perfectly accurate for
Yeah.
this. So that's perfect. With that, you obviously, when making it a Groundhog Day, it is kind of like a magic system, how the time works, how the reset, how he connects with Kronos. So, how did you come up with the magic system for the book?
Well, so I really like the aspect of bonding with creatures. So I think my most famous series is my Arcanist books, and those
Hmm.
are all about bonding to magical creatures to gain magic. It's different than this urban fantasy setting, but similar enough that you could be like, "Whoa, Shami has a thing," and it's bonding with magical creatures. So I like warlocks in general. Now, normally warlocks in like Dungeons and Dragons or in other media I've read, they're usually bonded to like a demon, and it's like a terrible, terrible deal. Maybe you know
Hmm.
what I'm saying? Like they're sometimes they're tricked into it, or they have to do terrible things that they don't want to do. This is a system more where when you go to make your pact, all the terms of the deal are just out on the table. And do you
Hmm.
accept it? You get the magic. If you don't accept it, you don't get the magic, that kind of thing. And I didn't like in a lot of these medias, warlocks only have one pact. So they really only have this one connection with this one
Hmm.
magical creature. So in my book, there are potentially five connections based on like the powers of your soul, basically. And so he has a pact with Kronos, and he can rewind the time, but he also has a pact with Keiko, the Ifrit of Rebellion. So he also has fire powers. Um, and technically, in the book, he makes another pact with a mischief spirit so that he can unlock doors and avoid camera detection and stuff like that. And I find that I guess, flexibility to be really fun to play with. Like, oh, it'll be fun in future books to see what else he bonds with or what other kind of magics he could get. Or sometimes the packs could be funny or interesting. So when he bonds with the mischief spirit, and again, this is a very minor spoiler. I think this happens in chapter 7. So really, really early in the book, the mischief spirit asks for a human body. Right, right. She wants a human body because she wants to inhabit a human body, and she'll give him his powers in exchange for that. So that's what he does. But that's interesting, right? Like that's like where's he going to get a human body? So this is a fun storytelling aspect. It's just a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, you're right that you handled it in such a way that you get to explore how the bonding works, but you left open potential. You're like, all right, we've bonded in one place, but there's what, like five or seven
Yeah,
places. So, you could have many books where each book has a different, bonding, and you could still, go on for a while. And you're right, the humor of it, that trying to figure out what's the catch or how they're going to react. I thought it was so funny at one point where they're talking about bonding, and the main character Adair, he's just kind of trying to warn, and he's using this as an opportunity to try to show Bree the dangers of it. And she's like, "All right, let's do it." And he's like, "No, you're not getting it. This is bad. This is not good. I'm not trying to encourage you." And she's like, "Oh, okay, I'll do it."
yeah. I love, love, love the dynamic between Adair Finch, the main warlock, and Bree, who is I guess the sunshine of the sunshine and
Hmm.
grumpy pair, right?
Yep.
The whole reason that Bree is with him is because in the book, again, this is not a spoiler. This is knowledge from like chapter 1. Bree's mother, or maybe even the blurb in the description,
Yeah, I think so.
is that yeah,
Hmm.
Bree's mother has been murdered, and she goes to Adair, and she's like, you know, I need your help. We need to catch this killer, right? But she is 12, and I guess there are a lot of fun and heartwarming moments with that because Dare is older and he's more jaded, right? He's like a
Hmm.
grumpy guy. And Bree is just so filled with life and she loves doing everything and she wants to be a warlock because she sees how cool Adair is. Like she starts to have this like, oh my God, you're so cool. I want to be exactly like you and do all these things. And he's like, oh geez, you don't want to be like me. Like I became a weird shut-in and things like that. You should not do this. But he tries to dissuade her and he can't. She wants to be a warlock and she learns everything from him. It's a fun dynamic. I know it's not original. There are lots and lots of stories where older mentor takes on super happy, life loving, mentee, but I really like that dynamic. And I think it really works for an urban fantasy where the reader also has to learn the magic system
Hmm.
because Bree is just asking all the questions that the reader would ask, right? So it's fun.
Well, I've noticed recently in the fantasy genre, a lot of authors are tapping in, and specifically with the dynamic of the kind of washed out
Yeah.
guy who's like maybe 30s, 40s, and the teen or preteen girl who's kind of more bubbly. And it's being done a lot, but I think it's because it works. It's really entertaining, and they balance each other out real well. So yeah, I love their dynamic. Now, since you used the pitch of Dresden,
Mhm.
I want to see how did you, because you obviously have to differentiate, because you don't want people to just say it's a copy, which I know as having read it, it's not a copy. But how
Yeah.
did you work his character so that it was similar to the Dresden Files, but not a copy?
So I would say his power set is very different than Dresden's power set.
Mhm.
I would also say that their personalities are in like a similar category, but obviously different. Dresden is a little bit more, I guess, cocksure for a better,
Hmm.
description. Like he's very confident, very sarcastic, and Adair, when we start out the book, has kind of given up on life.
Hmm.
And again, this is not a spoiler because this is in the blurb. This is in chapter one. Technically, he was more like Dresden back in the day, but his brother died in like a really unfortunate way, and that was a blow to his ego and his
Hmm.
psyche, and he basically just gave up. He locked himself away in his apartment for years to the point where even in the book when he's walking around, people are like, I thought you died. Like no one's seen you in years. Where were you? Like that kind of thing. And that kind of character dynamic is definitely different than Dresden. Now, Dresden sometimes has like people he's lost in the past in some of his backstories and stuff like that, but it doesn't like haunt him like it did with Adair, where
Hmm.
Adair just, I really like redemption stories when a character gets their mojo back. I really find that to be really, really fun
Hmm.
because I guess it's like uplifting, right? Like no matter the depression that you might go through, you can still come out of it. And so I really like that aspect, and I do think it differentiates Adair from Dresden in a way that um, is fun to read. Like it's fun to read Harry Dresden, don't get me wrong, but it's also fun to see a guy who is really talented get back up on the horse and do his really talented game again. And you're like, yay, he did it, like that kind of thing. So, yeah, I would say if you liked Harry Dresden, you'll probably like this, but they're definitely not exact copies of a character.
It definitely felt with the genre, they're both urban fantasy. Urban fantasy, from my experience, tends to be darker and more serious. Whereas this was a much lighter, there's more jokes happening, there's more fun banter. I mean, there's fun banter in Dresden, but this just comparatively, it just seemed lighter, which is to me what helped
Mm.
differentiate it. And with the humor, there were so many, not just like situational humor moments, but also there were so many references that I loved. And I won't spoil all of them, but there's one that is just where they're talking about, they're like, oh yeah, wasn't there this song about what foxes say or something? And it's obviously referencing what does the fox say? And I just lost it when that happened. So, and in an epic fantasy, that would totally take you out of it. But
Yeah.
in this, it worked perfectly. It felt, and you wrote it in such a way that you didn't actually use the phrase, what does the
Yeah,
fox
yeah.
say? But that's obviously what you meant. So my question is, how did you get the humor to land in those scenes and make the references work so well?
Well, two things. One, as an author, sometimes I fear I don't get them to land, right? So sometimes
Mhm.
I write a joke and I'm like, well, I think this is a banger, but obviously not everybody's
Right?
humor is the same. So I'm like, hope that resonates. Like, secondly, I like urban fantasy because it does take place in the real world, right? So I based this entire book off of Stockton, and I guess if you know anything about California or Stockton, I've also made funny jokes to
Hmm.
that
Yep.
setting.
Yep.
Um, but I like when the jokes are a little bit subtle, so that if you do get the reference, you're laughing. But if you don't get the reference,
It doesn't
like
bother you.
like in the characters in the scene, he's like, "Oh, wasn't there a song about foxes saying things?" And you're like, "Oh, they don't quite remember." So you could just keep reading, and it didn't pull you out.
Right.
I have read books where people make like a specific reference, but since I don't know who they're referencing, I don't understand what's going on. And just to be vague, but like there was a sentence once in a book that was like, this guy looked exactly like X. They name a person, and I know it's a real life person because I had to Google it. It was sports ball star or something like
Right.
that. But I don't watch sports ball. I don't know. I don't know anything about Nothing, none of those things. So their entire description of this character was he looked like somebody else, and I'm like, I don't know who that
Doesn't
is.
help. Yep.
Yeah, screw you. Like, I have absolutely no idea. You have painted me zero pictures. And so I wanted to avoid that. I wanted to avoid if you didn't get this reference, you suddenly have no idea what's going on. So most of the jokes are funny in a way that if you get it, that's cool. But if you didn't get it, that's okay. I'll still explain everything else that's going on, or the other character is confused along with you, that kind of thing.
And I felt that they were general and broad enough that they worked for if you just understand general pop culture. It wasn't like super into a specific type of like they weren't just jokes about fantasy or they weren't just jokes about like pop songs. They were things that like general everybody's kind of heard the What Does the Fox Say song, even if
Yeah.
they didn't listen to it. They know what that is. So
Yes.
it's kind of general like that. And there were other ones in there, not just that one that I liked. You talked about Adair and Bree and writing their dynamic. With Bree, you have the seriousness of what's happening with her mom, questions about her dad, but you still have so it's very heavy, especially at the beginning, but you also have the lightheartedness of her. How did you balance making sure that you didn't lose one or the other with her?
Well, so that was probably the hardest part of the book because having a murder take place is a bummer. You know what I'm saying? Like it's very hard
Mhm.
to not be like, whoa, that sucks. Um, I did put in a couple things in the book to help us move along from the sadness and get into the fun stuff. So very, very quickly, Adair has like a magical tea that helps people be calm, right? So even though Bree has, there is a funny joke too because it's his last packet of tea, but because he rewinds
All
time
right,
like
he
Groundhog
still has
style, yeah,
it.
several times he says this is the 14th time he used his last bag of tea or something like that because he just keeps using the exact same last packet of tea. It helps keep her calm so that she's not just constantly crying, because that would be a natural reaction if you lost one of your parents, but she gets to calm down quickly. At some point in the story something bad does happen, but because Adair can rewind time, he's like, you know what, let's just take some time to relax. Well, how about we go shopping at the mall and watch some movies and eat ice cream? And it's okay because he doesn't have the restrictions of time, right? Like he
Right.
can take I think they take a couple of weeks where he just
Hmm.
lets her absorb what's happening and they have like a fun almost pretty girl moment where she goes and buys outrageously expensive things and then they go back to his apartment and they have pizza and ice cream and they watch like what is it, Princess Problems, like because she's like a 12-year-old girl, right? So it's like a parody of a Disney movie or like Princess Diaries,
Hmm.
like that kind of
Yep.
thing. And I feel like that scene is really touching and lifts it back up from the what
Yes.
otherwise would have been a bummer, you know what I'm
Yes.
saying? And then we get back to the humor. So really I describe it as a roller coaster. Like
Hmm.
sometimes it's a high and we're having fun and we're laughing, but sometimes we have that low where something real happens. Like, oh, the severity of the situation is there is a murderer out there. The murderer is attempting to, kill other people. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but this is a bad guy and he needs to be stopped. So, we're at the low point, but it's okay because we're going to pick back up because we're getting evidence, we're figuring out who it is, we're learning magic, and oh, we got to face the bad guy, like that kind of thing. So it's roller coaster pacing, and I feel like it really helps get you to the highs and to the lows, and it never feels like this was out of place because that's what a roller coaster is.
And I think that you're right. That specific scene that you're talking about was like the bridge between the seriousness of the start of the book and the levity that happens towards the middle, where you're getting as the audience used to the magic,
Mm-hmm.
while also giving the characters time to breathe and not have this seriousness about them. So it kind of served multiple purposes,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is really great. And I also think that in my head, when I was reading that scene, I was thinking of the resetting of time in Loki season 2, where he keeps just going back and doing it over, and they have the a bit of Beethoven playing in the background. So that's what I had in
Yeah,
my
that's
notes.
perfect. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to talk for a second about working on the audiobook, because I believe the audio for this production was with Sound Booth Theater. Is that right?
Yes.
What's the process of working with a production company versus, say, hiring a narrator yourself?
So the process is pretty wildly different depending on the company. So I have worked with Tantor, Podium, Sound Booth Theater. I've also hired my own. When you hire your own narrator, you negotiate out your own contract. They send you the chapters. You personally listen to them, or you have like beta listeners listen it to you for you. Listen to it for you. And then you have to do the corrections yourself. You upload it yourself into whatever sort of distribution system you're going to do. And you get more money that way. But
Hmm.
I do hate the process of having to proof listen audiobooks and all this other kind of stuff because I feel like I'm not a very good listener to audiobooks. When I read super fast. So when I
Hmm.
listen to an audiobook, it feels like it's ridiculously slow. Like so slow. Like crawl like to a crawl where I'm like, "Oh my God." So I try to speed up the audiobook. Like I'll turn it on 2 times listening,
Hmm.
and then that's not good for catching mistakes because I'm listening to it super fast. So I don't personally like doing it. I have done it for many books. But recently I've worked with companies. When I give it to Tantor or Podium, I just give them the manuscript and usually a pronunciation guide. And then they handle everything and they just do it in the background and then it's a completed book. And sometimes with those guys, they just pick the release date too. Like I don't even have any input on what's going on there. Sound Booth Theater is still small enough that I talked to everybody involved in the process. I was even there in some of the recording sessions to talk about whether or not they were doing lines
Oh,
correctly and stuff. They had a whole team of people who did voices for all the different characters and they composed some music and they
that's
let
nice.
let me listen to the music ahead of time. We picked the release date with them, like I talked to them about it, the whole process. And so it was definitely a funner experience
Hmm.
with Sound Booth to get the audiobook made than it was with, say, Tantor or Podium, where I was basically not involved. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Now that's not entirely true. Tantor and Podium gave me options for narrators. Like they'll send me a list, like here's 5 guys we think would go good for your book, and then I listen to their samples and then I pick a guy. Um, Sound Booth Theater again, it has more of a personal touch because I think they're like 6 dudes who run the whole company. All right,
Hmm.
so they're still a smaller personal organization, and they make a lot of their deals, like their wheels and deals, are with people that they know, like who you've met in a conference and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So it's a completely different experience, not standard to how you would normally have a production company handle it.
Well, it seems like you have kind of a best of both worlds thing going where, as through self-publishing, you kind of have a lot of control over it, but also with, working with a company, you don't have to manage all the details yourself, and so you
Yes.
can hire it out. And getting multiple narrators, that's a great get if you can for a book, because
Oh
that
yeah.
always just makes the experience bigger. We have a mutual friend, and I know you may have even seen his comment on this that his book, which is entirely from the perspective of a teenage girl, just got their audiobook, and it's done by a guy, the narrator, and he was just
Yeah.
like, "Come on!" And
Yeah.
it was like, really? Did we not have a single woman, that could do the
There was
the
no female
narration?
narrator you
No female
had
narrator
anywhere.
at that company. So
Oh,
that is nice
jeez.
that you can have a little bit more opportunity to choose when you hire out.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to ask about the sequel. So the sequel comes out as we're releasing this today, and I'll put the cover on the screen. What can you tell people as like a tease for the sequel without spoiling anything for the original, the first book?
I would say so. Most people who have read the sequel from the first one say that the sequel is just better, like hands down. It's just a funner time. In the first one, we do start on a low, right? We start on the
Hmm.
heavy and then we get into the fun.
Yeah.
This book starts more on the fun and then gets into the heavy and then goes back into the
Okay.
fun. So it's a little bit more of that dynamic. There are a lot of not a lot. There's really two major characters who are introduced in this book. They're
Hmm.
on the cover, so if you flash the cover, you'll see
Yep.
one of them's a werewolf, and the other one is like a Twitch YouTube streamer, like a gamer girl. And that's probably the funnest part of the book. So I'm a huge video game person. I super
Hmm.
love gaming. I watch a lot of streamers and stuff like that. There's a lot of jokes. I feel like if you know anything about it, you'll get a laugh, and even if you don't know anything about it, you're gonna love what basically is the awkward humor of having a gamer in a group of people who are like thugs and gangsters. Like they're not gamers at all, but she's
Hmm.
making these types of references. So there's a lot of jokes like that. A lot of fun use of rewinding time to do things like win a poker game, for instance. Like
Oh, that's so
yeah,
cool.
stuff like that. So there's a lot of like fun tee-hee stuff that happens in book two that couldn't really happen in book one because it was a little bit more on the heavy side, right? Because we had to deal with something that was heavy. But at the end of book one, I guess this is like a pretty major spoiler, but I feel like most people will know anyway because there was a book two. But the main character gets his mojo back. So all of book two, he's a little bit more his old self, where he's, fun and confident. So a lot of people really like book two, especially after having read book one, where you're like, oh, I can see where this is going, like that kind of stuff. So,
Is this still a lot of the mystery, like the first book?
yes, this one has kind of two mysteries going on, because Adair, and again, this is a minor spoiler because it happens within the first couple chapters. Adair is hired to catch a guy's cheating wife. Like the guy is
Oh.
like certain that his wife is cheating on him, and so he wants Adair to catch this. But while that is happening, Adair finds out that there is a killer in Oakland who is targeting women. So there's two mysteries. One, mystery is the wife cheating, but they connect in such a way that I hope everybody has, I hope everybody has a fun time with these. There's technically two mysteries, one a little bit more comical and one that's serious, right? Because murderers are serious.
Yeah. And then before we go, I did want to ask if you have any other projects, any special editions coming out, anything else that you want to announce or pitch for everyone to look up.
Um, Coming out next will be one of my Arcanist books, so the fifth book in my Astro Academy series, and then sometime after that, I signed a deal with Aethon to have like a progression fantasy come out with them, and that'll
Hmm.
be coming out relatively soon, but I don't have a release date yet, but it'll be a banger. I finished up that book and I really liked it, so I can't wait for that to come out.
Oh, good. I'm looking forward to reading more from Avon. And if people want to find you online, where can they find you?
Well, I technically have social media everywhere. I'm on Facebook, on X, on Blue Sky, on the TikToks, like I also have
You're
my own
hip.
website, Shami Stovall. So there really isn't like if you are on a space, I'm probably also there and you can reach out to me, messages, email, anything like that. I'll get back to you.
Oh, wonderful. And I am very excited because I really loved the Time Marked Warlock, so I'm really looking forward to reading Chronos Warlock.
Awesome. I'm super glad you liked it. It makes my
Yeah.
whole night.
And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching. Let me stop the recording.